Welcome back to the channel, guys. So today in this video I'm going to discuss with you which types of carbs you should be eating. Okay, so we're gonna break it down into two types of carbs. We're gonna start over here on the left side of the board. So these carbs, I'm gonna break them down into smart carbs. Smart carbs are the carbs that you wanna be eating most of the time, okay? And we're gonna break those up into two sections. Your smart carbs, we have over here the Einstein of carbs, okay? So these are gonna be the types of carbs that Albert Einstein was eating on a regular basis. No, I'm just kidding. But these are the types of carbs that we want to be eating 80% of the time, okay? And I'm gonna break it down which types of carbs those are specifically. So we're talking about fruits, lentils, steel-cut oats, sweet potato, wild or whole grain rice, quinoa, and berries. So these is just an example of what you can eat. There's obviously a larger variety of these smart carbs. Generally speaking, these types of carbs usually come as one ingredient. For example, an apple is an apple. Right? It doesn't take multiple ingredients to produce an apple, right? Quinoa is one ingredient, right? Berries, same thing. Strawberries, it's just one ingredient. So these are smart carbs. They also tend to be lower on the glycemic index. Now you're probably asking yourself, what is the glycemic index? Well, I'm glad you asked that question. To answer that, let's go right to the internet. Alright guys, so I'm going to be reading this directly from webmd.com and I'll be providing the link in the description below. So what is the glycemic index? The index is a number. It gives you an idea about how fast your body converts carbs in a food into glucose. Two foods with the same amount of carbohydrates can have a different glycemic index numbers. The smaller the number, the less impact the food has on your blood sugar. So 55 or less in the index is considered good. Between 56 and 69 is considered medium, and 70 or higher is considered bad. So you could find the glycemic index on the labels of food packages. You could also do a quick Google search if it's something like, like salmon or something, right? So foods that are found in nature tend to be lower in the glycemic index than foods that are refined and processed. So what does this mean in English? Essentially, if you're eating candy, for example, if you eat a piece of candy, how fast that candy is going to be turned into glucose and essentially go into your bloodstream is going to be a lot faster than if you eat whole grain bread, for example. So bread is going to take a lot longer for your body to actually break it down into simple sugars and thus affect the level of glucose in your bloodstream. Is when your blood sugar levels are going up above homeostasis, your body needs to release a hormone, okay? And that hormone is insulin. So insulin is essentially going to pull the sugar out of your bloodstream. So this becomes an issue when you're constantly eating foods that are high in the glycemic index because your blood sugar levels spike really quickly. So then your body needs to release a lot of insulin, right? So if you're doing this over and over and over again, you're just constantly eating these types of foods, you're going to be producing this hormonal response as a way for your body to counteract the high spikes of blood sugar levels. So now that we know what the glycemic index is, how often are we eating these Einstein level smart carbs? Well, the answer to that is about 50 or with 50 to 60% of your meals. Now, you could go a lot higher than this. Again, if we reference my original video, we're using the 80-20 rule. So we want to be eating these carbs around with 50 to 60% of our specific carb intake, weekly carb intake. So now let's move along to the second section of the smart carbs. So these carbs are still very smart, but they're not quite as smart as the Einstein carbs over here. So I labeled them the Elon Musk carbs. So these carbs, you want to eat them once in a while, okay? So we're still eating them, but not as frequently as the Einstein carbs. So which types of carbs are these? These are things like parboiled rice, basmati rice, whole grain breads and pastas, and things like regular starchy potato, like a cooking potato, yellow potato, etc. Okay, and these types of carbs tend to be medium in the glycemic index. And how often are we eating them? We're eating them with about 20 to 30% of our weekly meals. Now, the last set of carbs that I'm going to discuss with you are the ones that you want to stay away from. These are the dumb carbs, and they're not going to make you feel smart. You're going to feel like this guy, especially after the initial sugar rush from these types of carbs. The frequency is going to be rarely, if even at all. Now, that's a bit of an extreme point of view, but some people like to avoid these types of meals entirely. I would recommend have them once in a while because, variety and is the spice of life, and these carbs are they're pretty good. So what types of carbs are these? We're talking about donuts, candy, cereal bars, muffins, chips, white rice, white pasta, sodas, juices, pastries, and these types of carbs. Again, this is a small list. There's a giant variety of these types of carbs, but these types of carbs tend to be quite high on the glycemic index, and previously explained to you what the glycemic index is. If you don't remember, just rewind the video. And these types of carbs, you want to eat them 0 to 10% of your weekly meals. With that being said, you can have these carbs once in a while. You generally want to avoid them. You definitely don't want to be eating these types of carbs if you are type 2 diabetes, for example, or if you are trying to lose some weight. Okay, these carbs are notorious for helping you keep the weight on, and this is why you want to avoid them. Also, there's one thing, if you notice, these types of carbs, you cannot find them in nature. They need multiple ingredients to make these things, right? More so some than others. So this is why you generally want to avoid these types of carbs, and you want to stick to these carbs, which are usually found how they are in nature. If you enjoyed this content and learned something about carbs, hit the subscribe button, smash that like. If you have any comments, leave them down below. Thank you, and I'll see you on the next video.